Of course, we don't know what the increase is going to be spent on. So all we've heard from the opposition today is that by the end of this decade, we'll be at about 2.5% of GDP. Under the current government's program, we'll be at about 2.26% of GDP, and then within 10 years, the opposition plans to get to 3% of GDP. And under the current trajectory from the current government, we'd be at about 2.33%. So we know it's more money for defence, and I think that is great. When we think about current defence spending, we're at about 2.03% of GDP. We say we're in our most significant strategic time since World War II, but we are spending less as a percentage of the economy than we were during the Cold War. And what that has meant is there are gaps in capability across defence that can't be addressed without funding. So I think it's positive, but we need to know more detail.
Yeah, so, I mean, how problematic is it that it's light on detail? We heard the Minister for Industry and Science, Ed Husic, saying that it's defence policy or a bumper sticker, I think he called it. I mean, where do you think that the money needs to be spent for it to have a material impact?
Well, I think the 2023 Defence Strategic Review actually highlighted a number of things that we needed to get after and address. But the funding really wasn't put in to address them. So this might be the opportunity to do that if the opposition is elected. I think number one priority is integrated air and missile defence. Now, what is that? That is having the capabilities to defend our key bases, critical infrastructure and deployed units from missile attacks, whether that's cruise missile, ballistic missiles. And we've seen throughout 2024 that missiles have been a key element of war. We saw those horrific attacks from Iran on Israel in April and October last year, where we saw hundreds of ballistic missiles fired. So I think that's number one priority. Number two priority, I think, is getting after defending our bases from counter-drone capability in our units. So how do we have the capability or buy the capability to shoot down uncrewed aerial vehicles, etc.? I think number three is growing our Navy. Now, I know that the viewers probably think, oh, we've had a lot of announcements about Navy. We've got nuclear-powered submarines, we've got new frigates. But actually, because of 30 years of underinvestment, the mine warfare capability, the replenishment capability, the hydrographic capability of our Navy has atrophied. It's gotten old. So we really need to be putting more money into that. And then fourthly, I'd say, sorting out the ADF reserves, which will cost money, but working out how do we get a more effective structure for the reserves across all three services, Army, Navy and Air Force, that can be mobilised in the event of a crisis or conflict. Those are things I would think would be the four priorities. I don't think that more F-35s and a fourth fighter squadron is a key priority. Yes, it's a nice to have, but there are a number of urgent issues we need to address before we get to that.
And those F-35A Joint Strike Fighters is something that the Coalition had previously committed to reinstate. But for our viewers, Jennifer, you've just outlined in a broad sense what both the major parties are offering when it comes to defence, given, as yourself is saying and others are also saying, that we are in the most dangerous time since World War II. Which party's policy platform on defence offers a safer future for Australia?
Look, I'm not going to pick a party on national TV, but what I would say is this. Australians do need to be thinking about the impact of national security. I know there's a polling out today from UNSW saying that Australians aren't too worried about defence spending. We are seeing conflict in Europe. We are seeing conflict in the Middle East. China is increasingly aggressive in our region. We saw that with the circumnavigation of warships of Australia recently. If we don't address our capability gaps, and that needs more money, then we are setting ourselves up for risk. We need to think about defence spending as our insurance policy. Investing in defence actually reduces the likelihood of a conflict or us needing to use that capability. So I think it's incredibly important. Now, the current government has increased defence spending. They have been the first government to do that since 2016. But it's certainly not enough. And so I think that voters need to take their own view, but I think they should be thinking about defence and national security.
You mentioned something I wanted to ask you about there, about Australians' appetite for increase in defence. Do you think what we're seeing from both the Coalition and the Labor Party is in line with what Australians want? Because that recent study that you're referring to found a third of respondents, only a third of respondents wanted defence spending increase, which means two-thirds didn't.
Look, I think there's some mixed polling on this. So UNSW study certainly says that. There is some polling in the Daily Telegraph today that says actually over 50% of Australians think we should increase defence spending. What we are seeing polling consistently say is that Australians are more concerned about our national security and the likelihood of conflict. Now, whether that translates into them being willing to give up other aspects of the budget, which is what we're going to have to do, right? We're already in a deficit. I'm not an economist, but we need to find the money somewhere if we're going to increase defence spending. I think that's an open question. But I do think it is important that we are talking about defence and national security this election campaign. I think many times during the last couple of weeks it has intervened because of issues, whether that is because of the conflict in Ukraine, whether that is because of the US administration comments about Ukraine, whether that's the Chinese warships, etc. But it has felt like till now that both parties really wanted to focus on cost of living, which I know every Australian is hurting from. But we need to think about the future, and if we're not preparing ourselves for the potential of conflict, it's not inevitable, but it is increasingly likely, then we are doing ourselves a disservice, and that will have significant impacts on our security and also our economy in the future.
Well, national security and defence was front and centre today. Jennifer Parker from the Australian National University's National Security College, thank you for your time.
Thanks so much.